Really great to be here today. Thanks to John and AMEC for inviting me here. Going to do two things today. So going to take you guys through a really quick background of myself, my journey to get here, why I'm probably invited up here to speak with you guys today, and then also give you guys a quick walkthrough of some new technology that we've built with our business, show you guys a glimpse into the future of what's possible with AI now. Okay, so jumping into my story here. So I've been an entrepreneur for about 20 years now. I started my first company back in college, was a pre-med guy starting out, and decided I was getting bored in the chem labs and wanted to try something different. So got into business, started my first company around 2008. Financial crisis, so not the best time to start a company. Where that took me, it's kind of hard to see with the lighting, but this bottom left picture here, it's a cold, unfinished basement in Reading, Pennsylvania that I lived in for about a year. Spent about 5 years just, living in and out of people's guest bedrooms, basements, just trying to do the first startup. A lot of odd jobs. I was a sushi chef for a little while, landscaping, construction, kind of you name it. Did a whole bunch of things while also living on unemployment. So I was off to a great start out of college, and after struggling for about 4 years, decided that it was time to go ahead and get a job. So I came across a company that everybody in here is probably very familiar with called Meltwater, and spent about a year at Meltwater and helped them launch their media contact database and press release distribution tool. On that journey, I met my co-founder for Trendkite. His name was AJ, so he's the guy with the glasses up here, back when he still had some hair. I probably shouldn't make hair jokes with the way mine used to look as well, but we were working at Meltwater, and what we saw was that there was this really big inefficiency in the market where we were delivering daily news alerts to everybody, but the large brands that we were working with were telling us, hey, we really want to understand the impact of our coverage, not just a list of news articles. So we decided to leave Meltwater and start Trendkite together. And the whole concept was really around dashboards and really beautiful reporting. So, we would jump in, pull all the data, and then just spend hours cleaning data, analyzing it, and building, some really pretty reports that I was doing back in Photoshop at the time. So the Trendkite journey was super fun. We got to build over about 7 years, work with many of the world's top brands, top agencies around the world, and I'm biased obviously, but I think we had the best product in the industry. And then around 2019, Cision ended up buying us, and then I took about a year and a half off. As everything was coming out with ChatGPT though, decided to come out of retirement, was just blown away by the technology and wanted to come back into the space and finish what I felt like we had started on the path of Trendkite, but then selling we didn't get to finish. So when I look back at that journey, I'd say what we got right that I'm very proud of is I do feel like we made a pretty big dent on the world where we moved everybody from general, just daily news alert monitoring and trying to make sense of that into being much more data-driven. I do feel like we really pioneered the media dashboards and moving folks into tracking total mentions over time and share of voice. A lot of folks, we would coach them from moving from just general share of voice where they were tracking their brand's total mentions against their competitors' total mentions into much more of a key message and brand prominence type of breakdown where it's like, okay, well, let's look at your core business units, your key messages. Let's identify your tier one headline coverage for that key message, your brand against your competitors. And I think the other thing that I was very proud of that we got to do as a result of that is, coming back into the industry now. We're still pre-launch, but we're working with a bunch of very large brands already. And I can't tell you how many times I've, reconnected with former customers, and they're just like, thanks so much. The data and the analysis that we were able to build with Trendkite helped me get my promotion or, my next job, things like that. So very grateful for that experience, but also when I look at it, so what didn't we finish? Well, one of the things that drove me pretty crazy when we were building Trendkite is, working with all these different brands, agencies. We've got thousands of these dashboards, and every single dashboard that we had, they all looked pretty much exactly the same. Squiggly lines, bar charts, pie graphs, and you'd look at these, and at a glance, didn't really tell you much of anything. We still had to have our team spend hours and hours and hours digging into the dashboards, clicking into the charts, reading all the articles, and just trying to synthesize all of that into typically monthly or quarterly media analysis reports that we would prepare for the customer. And we did that all inclusive at Trendkite, so I think we had really good relationship with our customers, but we definitely never finished what we really wanted to achieve, which was just getting people to insights and things that could be helpful in a more of a real-time manner. When I look at the current landscape as well, I really do think AI is exposing some pretty core measurement gaps. I'm probably a contrarian across this entire conference with how we're looking at GEO and LLM citation and how to control narratives across LLMs. We've done an incredible amount of research on this front, a lot of experimentation. And what we've seen is that with prompt monitoring, you're really, in most cases, you're asking a very specific question in an incognito mode, in a model, asking the API, not even the chat interface. And then you run it a bunch of times, you get a bunch of citation URLs, and then you're trying to use that as a basis to go say, oh, when people ask questions like this, we think it's citing this content. And in our analysis, when you think of how these models operate, there's a handful of things. One is that we really have no idea what people are actually asking. The models don't report this information. So we take best guesses. From there, when people are asking questions, now that these models have memory, the memory of the user is also influencing. So somebody might say, hey, actually, when you give me answers like, I don't care about YouTube, so never cite YouTube, never report on anything from YouTube. And now that's wiped out for that user. So there's just so many permutations of ways that people can ask questions with memory. And then there's usually subsequent questions as well. So it's usually not just, hey, who makes the best fill in the blank? Okay, now I'm going to buy that. It's usually a sequencing of questions. So as we looked at that and the black box that these LMs really are, we decided to take a very different approach where we do a study of the inputs that go into the models instead of focusing exclusively on the citations. And I think as you look at where measurement was back when we started Trendkite compared to where it is now, I wouldn't say, there's, I think a lot of folks that are just kind of floored right now where it's like, oh my gosh, we have no idea what these LLMs are saying to our customers, our board members, all of our stakeholders. And what I would say is that it's I think, a lot simpler than folks realize, in that the old way of measuring PR and communications is typically done at the article level. So everything was, total mentions over time. It was your total social engagements for your coverage. It was, share of voice, which was a function of just your total articles over time. And what the LLMs are exposing is that they just process this information differently. When you think of AI at its most granular level, it's really just taking a whole bunch of content, breaking it down into numbers, and then they are prediction engines where when you ask a question, based on how they're trained, they're going to provide information. So when you look at how the models train themselves, the approach that we decided to take was very different, where we've implemented a narrative clustering AI into our system that can look at a brand's entire coverage, and then as articles come in, they automatically get clustered. They either get assigned to a cluster that already exists if the article is directly related, or if there's a new cluster forming, it also recognizes that. So that was something that we've done an incredible amount of work on, and it's one of the things that we've patented early on with the new company. So other things that I'd point out, so it's been very interesting going from the way that we worked with brands at Trendkite compared to how we're working with brands now. Trendkite was very boots on the ground, Boolean. We're working with a lot of very junior folks typically to just get all the Booleans wrangled in. For large brands like Meta, we're building like over 6,000 searches across hundreds of dashboards, and then everything had to get configured, and it was quite messy. And when you think of that, it's like a CCO is probably never going to log into that system because it's just so complicated and there's so many moving parts. So the way that we've chosen to build the new product is really based on customer demand, as we've been working with brands, where what we're seeing much more at the senior leadership levels with CCOs, CMOs, is that they seem to care much less today about what we used to report on for quarterly and monthly media analysis reports, and they're much more focused on real-time judgment signals. What are the core risks facing our business today? What are the things that are non-obvious? For these core product lines, what's the key message pull through? What ultimately is the LLM being trained on with perception and eventually into citation around our core product areas, the ways that we make money as a business. And they want these briefings in real time. So I know the word trust has been going around a lot. When we build our system, we focused on foundational data at the very fundamental level, because what happens when you're building media monitoring systems is the internet's a super messy place. So you end up using a bunch of different data crawlers, licensed content providers. You pull that information in. You can think of it as just like a big database that you have to search, and that's where Boolean had to historically come into play and work. And as a result, you typically have very messy data. Also, you guys are probably all too familiar with problems with side links. That can create a whole bunch of irrelevancies as well. With broadcasts and podcasts, you're victim to transcription errors. So there's a lot of challenges with the traditional approach to monitoring. So when we started Handraise, we focused very early on what can we do to create as perfect of a data asset as we can for a brand. And it's been really nice hearing folks talk about this throughout the conference, because a lot of the things that we've built foundationally, I think, are frameworks that I'd recommend to everybody in this room as well, so that when you are doing AI analysis on any of your data, it's set up properly. So if you think of, you jump into Claude, you ask a question, you're asking it to do so many things all at once when you're just jumping into one of these foundational models, that the risk of hallucination is super high. It probably doesn't know every single article that is related to your brand. It's going to do a bunch of sampling as well, so maybe it's going to look in the live search at just like the first small batch of pages. So there's an incredible amount of problems with using the foundational models from our perspective for like high quality analysis and intelligence work. So getting into our framework. So what do we do? So we start with an AI approach to building the news feed. So to build a feed in our system, we trained a model. So we took our top Boolean expert from Trendkite. He went on to be the North American Director of Client Strategy at Cision for a couple of years. We brought him in and trained our model, where we can just take the name of a company, a one-line business description, and we use a blend of traditional machine learning and AI to create a hyper high quality, globally comprehensive, all the content comes in from all regions around the world, translates non-English language, and we get a very high quality, comprehensive and accurate news feed out of the gate. From there, we have additional AI models that assess for things like content categorization. So is it a news article? Is it a press release? Is it stock news? Because what we find over time is when folks want to ask questions, it's like, oh, that's interesting, but I don't care about financial news. Like, that's, different team, I don't care about that. It's like, okay, well, we can just, filter out of that. So we've just learned over the years all the different use cases for where categorization matters. Another thing is brand prominence. So we automatically identify things like headline coverage, feature coverage, passing mentions, as the brand talked about in the lead. Every single article that comes through our system gets automatically tagged and identified for that as well. We do some more standard enrichments where we do, domain authority with Moz. We do deduplicated unique visitors per month for readership with SimilarWeb. And then one of the other things that we've done from a patent standpoint is we've implemented brand-centric sentiment models. So every single article goes through a process where it's assessed to see, is this article positive, negative, or neutral for the brand based on exactly how the brand is positioned in every single piece of content. So all of those things then, when I mentioned, we trained our system to think like the LLMs. With narrative clustering, there's a mathematical model where based on how closely related all of the words are in the article, they get automatically grouped into these narrative clusters. And what it looks like in practice, I'll show you guys a really quick visual of this, is that all of the coverage, you can think of it like a 30,000 foot view where you can just see these are all of the top stories for the brand, for their competitors. for their industry. So the last piece up here then is the narrative velocity. So with these narrative clusters, because we've pre-computed all of this work ahead of time, we can also just like select a narrative cluster, see how it's trending over time. Is it positive, negative, neutral? Is there an inflection point? Because if there's a crisis, the brand has decided to do something to change how that narrative is playing out over time. And all of this work is what then makes a chat experience super high quality and possible. So if there's a key takeaway that I would love for you guys to take from this presentation in particular, I would say that it is you have to have really high quality foundational data infrastructure to be able to then use a chat experience in a way that you can trust it repeatably over time. So I'm going to show you guys a really quick demo of what this looks like. This is on a player, so I might talk quickly here because it's not going to loop or anything, it's just going to go through. But what I'm going to show you guys really quick is how we practice this. So what you're going to see is the narrative clusters on the left side of the screen. You'll see data visualization on the right. We'll see the list of articles. And then once I talk through a couple of those things, you guys will see what this chat experience actually looks like in action. So here we go. Okay, so you guys see the clusters on the left. As we're scrolling down, these are just all of the articles for the brand. Because we've done all of that pre-compute, we're able to sort by things like our LLM impact score, where we're looking combined at brand prominence and publication visibility and credibility. This is zooming in on that sentiment, where we look through the lens of the brand to identify how the brand is positioned. We provide an AI rationale into why we scored it the way that we did. Makes it really easy to assess all of the coverage. From there, we're able to see what that impact over time looks like. So this is looking at Tesla news across the US. Dark red is going to be high impact negative. Dark purple is going to be high impact positive. We've built like a shopping experience filter system here. So you could say negative coverage, high impact. You'll see all the clusters automatically update. And then we're able to see that coverage over time. Makes it really easy for a brand to be able to see what were our most high impact positive or negative articles. And then when we select any of those individual clusters, this is where we can see that coverage over time. Again, seeing the actual article components that are driving that perception. From there, you'll see I'm going to click into this chat experience. Because we've done all this pre-compute, we can map the business to the news. We can set up all the product categories, the way the brand thinks about themselves. In this case, I asked, what are the most high-impact, non-obvious risks for Tesla over the last 30 days? And what it's able to do, because it has all of our pre-computed intelligence, in addition to the full text of all of the coverage, is it does an absolutely insane job at pulling out exactly what the most high-impact, non-obvious risks are. So where this has been like just breathtakingly amazing from my point of view is what I think this really unlocks is the strategic intelligence and analysis for the rest of the company as well. So like what we're seeing that I never would have expected back in Trendkite is more of the executive leadership team is actually using these insights in these reports. So one example is we had a very large healthcare company reach out to us and say, hey, the Luigi Mangione trial is coming up. Can you do an analysis based on what's being said in the news and provide us with a briefing for risk, legal, finance, some of our other core business units, what we should be doing to plan and get ahead of whatever's most likely to happen with the crisis. We see other things where folks are doing earnings announcements and analysis and want to understand how their news is impacting their stock price. We can jump into the chat and say things like, hey, the stock price drops over the next 30 days. Why did that happen? The stock price increases over the next 30 days. Why did that happen? And it does an incredible job at predicting events, making recommended action plans. It's just like a whole new level of intelligence that was never possible before. So, okay, so what do I believe now about this? So, I very, very much believe that where we as an industry are going, like when I think of competitors for our company, I pretty much just think of one thing. I'm like, okay, when Claude comes out and says, we've got Claude for PR, like what is that going to look like? And I view my job as staying ahead of that so that as those models get better and better, our product gets better and better. and it's not a competitive situation. But as I've been watching just the crazy breakthroughs with these models and what we're able to build with them now, my very strong belief is that the legacy ways of monitoring and measuring and looking for business impact from news is changing. I think we're shifting very quickly from a world where, back at Trendkite, it was like, hey, we need a quarterly media analysis report, or hey, this big event happened, so can you, do an analysis for us and get that over? And then it's like, hours, days, weeks, sometimes end of quarter reporting would get delivered like a month after the end of the quarter. Not super helpful. What we are seeing the shift into is real-time insights and action being taken on top of all this data. So when there's a crisis, it's like using chat to understand, hey, is this something we should react to? Is the story accelerating? Is it decelerating? Is it, national news picking it up? Is it just a local channel? How should I talk to my executive leadership team about this? Those are the types of things that we're seeing folks spend real-time cycles on. And for comparison, I'd say at Trendkite, product usage was, I bet, over 90% just cleaning up data as folks in there just editing articles, retagging sentiment, doing all that type of work. We're now seeing like large brands that are spending like over 100 hours a week in our chat interface just doing this type of analysis. So my prediction over the next 12 months is that, I think everybody in this room certainly is going to be asked, increasingly so for things like, hey, for these core product categories, what are the top stories that are, driving LLM perception or citation? I need a briefing like today. Can't you guys use AI? Like, figure this all out. And I think that we are already seeing, across all of our customers, we still do quarterly media analysis reporting because there's obviously, reviews and whatnot. But definitely over 90% of the work that we're doing is this real-time judgment analysis. And that's what I see as well. And I think that the LM citation analysis and work that people are doing, if it's helpful, great. I encourage folks to try lots of things with all the new technologies that are out there. But the other piece of it is I predict that people are going to move away from the LM citation output analysis, realizing how fragile it is, and begin moving more into an input analysis of, if we can understand the full narrative landscape for our brand, and we understand, mapped against the core things that we care about as a business, which stories are most likely driving perception and citation, how are we being talked about, how are we being positioned compared to our competitors. I believe that is where most brands are going to be moving into the future with us. And then it looks like it doubled a slide here. There's a key takeaways slide here. The key takeaways are going to be the shift from total mentions over time, share of voice, total social engagements over time, all of those kind of traditional ways to measure communications performance. I do believe that is, we're already at a moment where that's changed. So highly encourage everybody to get on the bandwagon of getting into, narrative analysis and insights. The other part is just, I highly encourage everybody also to move into understanding how these AI models actually work and how prompt monitoring actually works in practice, what it pulls out when you're running citation analysis. There's a bunch of studies out there you guys can check out around ghost content as well. These models are trained on a lot of data that when you get your comprehensive list of citation content, it never makes its way into those citations. So there's a whole bunch of content that is influencing the LMs that nobody has in their citation content. So I'd encourage everybody to just get really smart about how these models work and understanding how your narratives are being portrayed across the news, especially as it relates to highly patterned coverage where it's saying the same thing consistently across a diverse set of publications, especially if there's executive quotes in that coverage. These are the types of things that the LMs are really going to reach out for and use no matter what somebody, with their memory, with their sequencing of questions asks. So with that, love to open it up for any questions.
Thanks so much, Matt. That was great. We've had a lot of content about narrative and storytelling, and it's really interesting how you've pulled all that together. Does anyone have any questions for Matt before we close out the room for today? Down here, thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, Matt. Long-time TrendKite customer.
Awesome.
And I love the direction of where you're going. As I was looking at the things that were, the narratives that we're pulling through, the examples, they look like they were almost all written as headlines or framed kind of as headlines. And I guess there's another way to think about narratives that we see with a lot of our clients where they might have 3 to 5 narratives that they're trying to drive over the course of the year. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, how would somebody use your system to be able to kind of evaluate kind of the long tail or the long term of what they're trying to drive, and how does that relate to kind of what you showed?
Yeah, absolutely. So they are intentionally written as headlines just for easy comprehension for us to understand what the stories are. I'd say there's 2 approaches to achieve what you're looking for. One of them is in the data platform side of things, where we'd set up, we call them key message buckets, where whatever those 3 core narratives that the brand has that they're trying to run over the course of the year, we'd set that up as a key message, and then all of the individual narratives that are running throughout the year related to that would appear there. The other way to do it is in the chat experience. It's even for ourselves with Trust, everything that we did was very data platform focused early on, and now as our chat just keeps getting better and better, we've really been shifting a lot of these types of things into the chat experience, where you can say, hey, over the last year, for these 3 key messages, analyze all of the coverage, all of the narrative clusters, and identify how the brand's positioning, how their storyline has changed over the course of the year, and also give me examples of where we could do a better job, as an example. And it'll do like a full storyline for you. It'll show you where the story first came out, how it's morphed over time on a timeline, and provide an action plan. So those are the 2 ways I would think about it. But I think the chat experience is where, if you ask me this question in like a year, I'd probably say everything's done in chat. Just ask the question that you want, and you'll get the answer you're looking for.
Great, thanks, Matt. Anyone else have a question? Just down here.
Hi, yes, again on the narrative clusters and the Tesla example, there was obviously a lot of detail when you were pulling out some of the examples. I think I saw something, in terms of negative. What were the non-obvious observations that were coming through? That looked interesting. I didn't have time to read what they were.
I'd have to look back at them. Let's see. I'm gonna let it run here. I don't recall.
I mean, just the kind of things, not necessarily specifically these, but the kind of things that it can draw out.
Yeah, let's see here.
Thank you.
So the kinds of things that can draw out are, I'd say, unlimited. It really just comes down to the prompt that you ask. And some of the work, where I also see over the next year things changing is, in a perfect world, we'd be able to just say, hey, what are the most high impact risks for the brand? Other things that we do behind the scenes with our chat are we add a whole bunch of skills and tooling. So like for risk analysis, there's a 14-page prompt that I had to create to be able to create a high quality, consistent, repeatable way to analyze risk in a way that doesn't sound alarmist, doesn't have the brand do things that it shouldn't do that are not in its best interests, all of those types of things. We'll see here in a couple seconds what it pulled out for the top risk for Tesla. This was run, I want to say on Friday evening. Sorry for getting my presentation in late. And the other thing, so you'll see that there's filters selected here. I'm pretty sure I turned them off as well, but we have a double chat experience. So you can just have an open chat, and then we also have context-aware chat, where if you're in the data platform side of things and you've selected any of your key messages or any of your narrative clusters and you want to ask questions, then when you hit the chat in the data platform side, it maintains that context and then provides the analysis. So, okay, let's see what we got here. So you can see it studied 20,000 mentions, risk 1, Cybertruck wheel detachment recall. confirmed high coverage persistence. Let's see here. Looks like wheels were falling off. Why now? So what it's going to do as it's scrolling through here is part of that 14-page prompt for risk analysis is also looking for real use cases in the news that are where these things are actually happening. So as it assesses risks, you can do it across your brand feed, your competitor feed, your industry topic feed. So kind of like what Kyle was talking about with Shell earlier today, we're able to pull in the full body of the world of these brands and then analyze all of that coverage to be able to extract what these potential risks are. And we're able to do it well ahead of when they're actually a crisis. So some of the risks that will come out will say, this is actively going on right now. Here's a list of tier 1 articles where this is happening. It hasn't yet maybe brought your brand into it, but like this event is happening. Other times it'll say, hey, there isn't really any coverage for this yet, but based on what I'm seeing in the coverage, this is something that you should definitely keep an eye on over the next few weeks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matt. Please give it up for Matt Collins.